I want to thank you for coming in such numbers to this very important occasion. I assume most of you use the link and already have read the book from cover to cover. But for those of you who may not have, we will also have explanations and discussions of the book. And as well, we are honored today that Professor Peter Potichnyj could be with us for this occasion. Я називаюся Френк Сисин з Канадського інституту українських студій. Ми видали цю книжку, очевидно, на онлайн, і через то є загальнодоступне для всіх, включно з тими, що є в Україні і в Польщі, де я вже бачу є досить велике зацікавлення з тою книжкою. І то, значить, перша рецензія навіть появилася. Ми є раді бачити, що люди розуміють значення цієї книжки про Павлокому. Я думаю, також надзвичайно важливе є, що на загал, як ми говоримо про Павлокому, ми думаємо про сумні події. А ця книжка є трохи інакше, показує нам, що було і життя, і довголітнє існування української громади в Павлокомі. І також, що то є не тільки справи одного села, але через те, що викидці з цього села є по цілому світі, що ми бачимо всякі ті пов'язання людей з Павлокоми. І між ними, очевидно, доволі велика еміграція з Павлокоми і в США, і в Канаді. І то до певної міри пояснює, чому та книжка тут появилася і не на рідних землях. Ми є раді, що кілька наших організацій є співспонсори, і я би перше просив, що Ірина Ревуцька, президент Українського документаційного центру, би вас вітали. Прошу, Ірина.
I take it that applause was for you, Frank. Thank you for that introduction, Frank. Wonderful to see all of you here this afternoon. It's a great honor and privilege for the Ukrainian Canadian Research and Documentation Center to sponsor this book launch. So very pleased that all of you are here. Маю велику честь привітати всіх вас від імені Українсько-Канадського дослідчо-документаційного центру на презентації книги, написану Петром Потічнім and Peter Yakob. So, congratulations to the two Peters. Презентація цієї книги дала УКРДЦ можливість також віддати пошану видатній кар'єрі пану професору Потічному. Не лише в історичному дослідженні села Павлокома, а і Закерсоня, а у загальному формуванні розвитку соціальних наук в Північній Америці. Congratulations, Professor Potichnyj. Ви є наш власний академічний скарб. And I just said that Professor Peter Potichnyj is in fact our own academic treasure. Just a few words. As Frank mentioned, the UCRDC has organized this event with some other organizations, and I think I should make it known that Об'єднання українців Закерсоня, thank you for your assistance, the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, Канадський інститут українських студій, thank you for your help, the University of Alberta, the Peter Yakob Center for Ukrainian Historical Research. many thanks to all of these organizations for supporting this particular event. And of course, I have to thank our administrator, Bożena Gimbaciuk, who organized this event. Дякую, Bożeno. So, anyway, дякую дуже за увагу і за присутність. Thank you all for attending again and enjoy the event.
How many of you have roots in Zakrzania? Okay, quite a few. І ми є раді, що наш співспонсор цієї події є об'єднання Закrzania. Я би хотів просити представника Богдана Шевчика говорити, вітати вас.
Добрий день. Вітаю всіх, а спеціально пана професора Петра Потічного. Як сказав пан Федак Богдан, покійний вже, що хоч би була одна рушниця, хоч би був один постріл, можливо би до тої трагедії не дійшло. Не було, села були безборонні. Але коли на цю територію прийшла українська повстанська армія, пан професор ще в молодому віці включився в боротьбу і вступив до сотні Громенка. І в інтерв'ю, яке зробила пані Новаковська, ви сказали, що коли ви дістали зброю в руки, ви почули себе як рівний з рівним. І завдяки тих всіх, які боронили населення, багато людей пережило і дало життя так нам, за що вам дуже-дуже дякуємо. Ви потім стали професором і ще описали це все в науковий спосіб. Потім виступали на дуже багатьох конференціях наукових, де говорили правду за ті землі. І тому то ще раз вам дуже дякуємо. І в імені професора Петра Потічного об'єднання українців Закrzania вплатило $1000 на фонд Unite with Ukraine при Світовому конгресі українців, щоб ті, що тепер боронять Україну, мали якусь поміч і також і в вашому імені. Дуже дякуємо всім.
Також включилося об'єднання Pawłokoma, а тут є представник пан Peter Potichnyj. Я би просив його до слова.
Щиро дякую. Вітаю всіх. Заля, бачу, дуже повна. Це прекрасно побачити. Я не маю якоїсь великої доповіді, але хотів тільки сказати, що в нас існує така фундація Pawłokoma, яка, власне, допомагала з тим, щоб, перш за все, відновити цвинтар в Pawłokomі. Після того, коли ми добилися відновити цвинтар, ми тоді пробували побудувати пам'ятник, де вказано, хто загинув і чому загинув. На жаль, нам польська влада тоді не дозволила написати, як загинули ті люди і чому там від маленьких дітей до старих бабусь поховані. Тільки дозволили напис дати «загинули трагедію». Не знаю, може якийсь метеор впав чи що, бо нічого другого не хотіли дозволити. Але я тільки хочу сказати, що коли такі села, як Pawłokoma і другі, зроблять навіть таку маленьку роботу, відновити цвинтар, відновити ті пам'ятники, це тоді дає вам оказію, щоб хтось побачив, хтось хоче щось про це написати, хтось хоче щось про це зробити, чи фільм, чи, можливо, написати книжку, показати, і тоді воно розходиться по світі, і тоді, власне, від того більше і більше людей знають і про це все довідуються. Так що я закликаю також інакші села, місточка по територіях Закерзоня, про яких, очевидно, ви згадуєте і читаємо часами, але справді можна дуже багато зробити, і тоді це більше зацікавлює. І, як ви, може, пам'ятаєте, таке коротеньке, маленьке перемир'я переходило, власне, в Павлокомі, де президент Yushchenko і польський президент Kaczyński в цей час мали перемир'я. Вони вибрали тоді Павлокому, тому що щось там було зроблене. І це для них також цікаво. Я хочу відразу сказати, що подяка для президента Yushchenka, бо він тоді натиснув на Львівську область, і вони нам трошки навіть грошей докинули, щоб докінчити це все скоріше. Це також є позитивно, коли щось пробуєте робити. Але це все про фундацію Павлокома. Я хочу подякувати для мого стрійка Петра Потічного і для to Peter Yakob for doing this book, organizing this book. It's a different type of book. They will talk about this. But I also would like to wish Striko Potichnyj, and actually my dad, who is one of the triplets, Andriy Potichnyj, also sitting here in the front. They're both 95. Unfortunately, we lost the third one. And I wish Striko many, many years. Вам ще дожити до 120. І я кажу 120, бо я раз сказав на родинах до 100, то людина, якій я бажав 100, казала, мій сусід вже 103, чому ти мені погано бажаєш? То я вже 100, то вже тепер небезпечно. Так що, Стрійко, до 120. Дуже дякую. І в нас є таке маленьке відео. Я мав оказію бути в Павлокомі, до речі, недавно. Це відео було зроблено трошки скоріше.
Богородице, дуйся не
Now, the roots of Pawłokoma go very deep, and that means the co-author of this monograph collection and documentary study is already a third-generation Pavlokoma in the U.S., and with him is Mr. Peter Yakob, and with him is his son John. That'll give us a fourth generation from Pavlokoma, who worked as well on many of the technical aspects of the book. So I would like to ask Mr. Yakob to give us an account of how the book came about, and as well his many years of cooperation with Professor Potichnyj. Please, Mr. Yakob.
Before I get started, I have a written speech here that I'm going to give. I do not speak Ukrainian. The only words I know is yabluko and one other one, onions. What's onions? Cibulia, yeah. And Yanisnayu, so I can deny everything. I go by Pete. This is Peter. I'm the young one, and he's the senior editor, writer on the book. I'm going to talk about the journey that Professor Potichnyj and I traveled that led us to co-author the Ukrainian village of Pavlokoma. Today, let me speak of our journey and where it will lead to. Am I okay? We are here to promote the book also and talk about it. I am also delighted. I can't tell you how delighted I am to be here to celebrate the distinguished career of Professor Emeritus Petro Joseph Potichnyj. Did I say that right? Good. Our journey began in 1999 when I retired as a chemical engineer. Shortly thereafter, I became interested in my family's history. My approach in the early years was to do online research on the computer. A genealogy site called Ukraine.com was one of my favorites. One of the advisors was a woman named Hania, last name unknown. I believe she lived in New York and was knowledgeable in all things Ukrainian. Two other ladies, Ruth Zarsky-Jackson from Toronto here, and Irene Liv from Live Ukraine assisted in my Pawłokoma research. I was known to them simply as Tempo. I guess that's Peter, isn't it? Petro, yeah. Hania suggested that I contact a professor in Toronto who had recently published a book on Pawłokoma. Guess what? The professor was Peter Potichnyj. I wrote to him explaining that I was doing research on my maternal grandfather, Nicholas Petrovich, who was born in Pawłokoma in 1875 and who migrated to Pittsburgh in 1903. I also contacted Zenon when he was you're still president of the Pawłokoma Foundation, I believe. I purchased several books related to the village, including Peter's history book. It took 6 months or about for me to receive a PDF list of the March 45 victims. The professor was still very deeply busy with as editor-in-chief of the Lietuvos. Am I saying that right? Lietuvos UPA. See, I say things phonetically, and my friend here, Peter, corrects me every time. But that's the problem with not knowing Ukrainian very well. To my surprise, the names were all in Ukrainian. It took me several weeks to transliterate letter by letter from Ukrainian to English. The exercise gave me a reasonable understanding of the Ukrainian alphabet, but it did not allow me to understand written or spoken Ukrainian, unfortunately. I could say that name there. Right? Shortly after I received the books that I had purchased, one of the pages of the history book contained 72 individuals who migrated from Pavlokoma to Canada or the U.S. Previously, I had completed extensive research on immigration from the village. The professor's list of 72 names grew to over 600. And this is the book that I sent to him as a result. I sent a copy to Peter. This was the first in a series of monographs that I had developed that I called my Pavlokoma Diaspora series. And it has the list of all those names in it. Peter's response was pretty simple. Where were you when I was writing my book? I came to believe that he now considered me a serious researcher of Pawłokoma. That was the statement that I believed in. Routine emails, telephone calls, and trips to Canada follow. We have 2 volumes of written correspondence over the years. You know, it is possible that Peter felt his knowledge and my data research could be the foundation of a demography book. I received a phone call one day where he suggested that we collaborate on a book together. This took us down the road to where we co-authored the historical demography book that you are hearing about today. During development of the book, Peter and I made a trip to Rochester, New York to meet Ola Kostowska-Czerwinski. Am I saying her name right, Peter? The purpose of our visit, and I might ask you to put that map back up if you would, was to create the neighborhood map that you will see at the front of the book. Peter and Ola, she was about 100 years old at the time, I believe. She's older than you are, right? Yeah. Sat at her kitchen table with a large cadastral map, which is the basis for that map, from the 1850s. Their mission was to place on the map all the houses and neighborhoods that existed in Pavlokoma in 1945. A few weeks later, I received that map. Guess what? All written in Ukrainian. A spreadsheet was created to create that map that you see in the book from their work. That was a fun project. During these years, I would send Peter my diaspora series. He graciously agreed to place my research materials in his archival collection at the University of Toronto, which is extremely extensive. I think there's 265 plus books or boxes. Yeah. More about the book. Once we had developed the manuscript, Peter approached CIUS. His presentation eventually led to a significant research grant for us. Our book is the first to be published online by CIUS, I believe, right, Frank? Most of you know you can read the book online at no cost. The book is basically divided into 2 sections. The first 200 pages are the texts that describe the history, the customs of the village, as well as our approach to writing the book. The second contains nearly 400 pages of data presented in spreadsheet form. There's a copy on the table there that I printed out. It's pretty thick. I don't recommend you all print it out. If you do, the best advice I could give you is use pre-punched paper, 3-hole paper. It'd save headaches. Anyways, let's open the book and take out a black marker and cross out every reference to Pavlokoma. Also mark out all the data on the spreadsheets except the column headings. What you have left is a possible model to follow for research on other Ukrainian villages in Galicia and Ukraine. We have also identified many data sources that will allow future researchers to pursue, including models that Frenchman Louis Henry developed in the 1950s, which became the origins of historical demography. The use of surnames will also be useful in census record searches to identify Ukrainians, since their nationality wasn't always recorded on census records. Russians, Poles, I don't know, that's not mine.
Don't worry about it.
That was this. I'm falling apart here. Use census record searchers to identify who is actually Ukrainian. There are a lot of studies of that right now being done. I will also turn my attention now to chapter 4 in the book, which describes a technique which we developed to create a data string referred to as the Pavlokoma Personal Identification Number, or simply PPIN. This alphanumeric string uses American Soundex code for each individual. This sounds pretty deep, but I'll explain in a minute. Together with the first letter of the person's name, followed by gender, and the last 3 digits of the birth year. The PPIN can be found in each of the spreadsheets, and most importantly, it identifies each individual as a unique person. The number is like the Canadian SIN. SIN, you have that number, huh? Or the U.S. Social Security number. You know that from personal experience that your records have a unique number that identifies you no matter what the difference in spellings or the record source. That's how they keep track of us. The professor's PIN, for example, would be P325 PM 930. The P325 is the Soundex number. P is Peter's first initial. M is gender, and the last 3 digits, 930. I hope you were born in 1930. Yeah. We are also able to generate PINs automatically thanks to help from my sons on the computer on all these spreadsheets. So all I had to do was type in a surname and boop, boop, we had all the PINs and Soundex numbers generated. Hopefully other researchers will find our ID number useful in their research. I think this is a unique thing that we are presenting to the world here today, Peter, this PIN system. Our journey does not end with the publication of the book. There are more stories to be written about the village, the villagers, as well as the immigrants and their families. While Peter may not be able to continue the journey with me, I am happy to say his knowledge and support will continue forever in my mind and in my heart. We are here to celebrate Peter. A lot has been discussed about the journey that Peter has taken. There's one more journey that everyone in the room should be aware of. His autobiography, which is over there, is titled My Journey. It can be found online along with many of the other books sitting on the table. I am sure that many scholars and acquaintances, many of you that aren't sitting in the room around the world, including Howard Astor, Peter's Jewish colleague at Masters University, Pawłokoma survivors, and comrades in the UPA and Dutch Army veterans, all of whom wish they could be here to celebrate Peter's long and distinguished career. I have come to know Peter as a co-author, a colleague, a mentor, which he often denies, and especially as a friend. If I have any regrets about the journey we have traveled together, it would simply be that we did not meet years earlier. One can only imagine how much more we could have accomplished telling the story of Pavlokoma. One final thought. Tomorrow will bring improved research techniques using artificial intelligence and analyze data and technology. DNA research will also improve in the future. Peter and I have taken DNA samples. We are third cousins. I celebrate the fact that we are family. That's the end of my speech, except it's not. I'm going to continue on for one scribbly page here. Yesterday, Peter and I talked at length about how to work with all the spreadsheet data in the book. Simple searches can be made on the book as it exists online in PDF format. It is not enough. Readers need digital access to the major files such as birth records, marriage records, death records, immigration records, and the neighborhood records in Excel spreadsheet form. The formulas used to create Sondex numbers, pins, should also be replaced, which are not in the PDF format. Access to pivot tables, which you don't need to know about, is just a tool that spreadsheet users use. For searches, sorting, and graphing is essential. Record linkage. All these records need to be linked together so we can pull the PIN numbers from all these files into one spreadsheet. And it would help researchers immensely if we could do that. Peter and I both believe that in order to provide maximum benefit to our readers, must have digital access to the data. Professor Roman Melnick said essentially the same thing in his review of our book, about a week ago, I think it was recently done, that we need data to be presented to our readers. The task of providing data in digital form is possible if a dedicated group of individuals can get together and provide at a reasonable cost the technology required to put this together. It's very doable. And I have some experts that tell me how. Yeah, sitting there in a blue sweater. So that's basically what it is. I'm surprised that did I talk about what you needed to talk about? Yes, no. Tak, ni? Yeah, tak. Oh, well. Huh? You understand? That's the end of my speech. I could go on for probably several hours on that, but I see people in the back nodding back there, so I better quit. And I just want to say thank you, Peter, for the years that you have given me. And I am proud to be your friend. Thank you. There's some cards with my name on it if you want to help with doing the next step. I'll get out of here your way. Thank you.
Pan Yakob казав, що рецензії вже появилися. Та рецензія, що називається «Віднайти мешканців втраченого українського села». Нова книга про Павлокому. То є на веб-сайті «Україною модерне». І легко там на Google знайти. І автор є Роман Мельник. Надзвичайно цікава рецензія і ґрунтовна. As it comes up, there is a Pawłokoma link throughout our discussion. When CIUS took over what for me seemed like a daunting task, and those of you who heard all the numbers may agree with me why I thought it was daunting, we knew that we had to find the right editor. And the right editor was not only because our senior editor, Roman Senkos, was at the Institute, but because as well his mother was born in Pavlokoma. I'd like to ask Roman to please talk about the book and his experience with the editing.
It was an easy job, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll get to that. Yes, before I make my remarks, I wanted to thank Peter Yakob for all the work he's done. Should I turn it? What? Okay. I want to thank Peter Yakob for all the work that he did, and for our collaboration, I guess I would say. I mean, I was in touch with him a lot. I had questions that he would answer, and he's explained a bit the technical aspects of the work and of the book, and that's very important. It's a significant study, I might say. So, I have also some written remarks, because I didn't want to speak off the cuff, unless I was going to speak in Polish, which I decided not to do. Years ago, back in 2001, when he was 2 years younger than I am today, Peter Potichnyj asked me to say a few words at the Toronto launch of his first history of Pawłokoma, his native village. I accepted his invitation without hesitation, as it was a great honor and pleasure for me to do so. My participation in today's launch, should I move the microphone away, or is it? My participation in today's launch of Professor Potichnyj's second history of Pawłokoma, written this time in English with Peter Yakob, is of course doubly a great honor and pleasure. I've known Peter Potichnyj for nearly a half century, since the latter half of the 1970s, when I began working as an editor at the Toronto branch of the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies. From the very beginning of the Institute's scholarly activities, Peter Potichnyj was its great supporter and close collaborator. He helped to publish its first textbooks, on which I worked at the KIU's Toronto office, and organized 3 important and influential international academic conferences at McMaster University on Ukrainian Polish, Ukrainian Russian, and Ukrainian Jewish relations. And the books are there, the papers are on that table. Professor Potichnyj compiled and edited the collections of papers presented at these conferences, and they were published by the CIUS Press. He also prepared for our press a collection of key documents of the wartime Ukrainian nationalist underground's political thought in English translation, co-edited with, I guess now, the late Johann Stendera. I also know and respect Professor Potichnyj for his tremendous contribution to the initiation and publication of the significant multi-volume Chronika OPA, Chronicle of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, book series, and for his painstaking work in compiling the best collection of archival documents on the Soviet state's struggle against the OUN UPA, which he donated to the U of T Toronto Library for preservation. This collection and the Chronika OPA have enabled contemporary and future scholars to study in detail and objectively the history of the Western Ukrainian nationalist underground during World War II and the unofficial but total war waged by the Soviet state until the first half of the 1950s. Then, in 1996, I had the honor of editing and publishing a collection of 15 articles written in honor of Peter Potichnyj by his colleagues in Canada, America, Ukraine, and even China, as a special issue of the Journal of Ukrainian Studies, for which I was responsible for many years. There's another reason, and this was already, you were told that I might say this. There's another reason why I'm pleased to speak to you today, namely my family background. My mother, Evgenia Karpa, and her brother and two sisters were all born in Pawłokoma, but when their parents went to France as migrant workers during the Great Depression, they were taken by their maternal grandmother and uncles to live with them in the village of Hlidno, 14 kilometers from Pavlokoma. During the Second World War, my mother and her brother were transported to Germany as forced laborers, while their one sister was evacuated from Lviv and survived the terrible siege and Battle of Stalingrad while serving as a nurse in the Red Army. None of them were in Pawłokoma when the brutal massacre of 366 of the village's Ukrainian inhabitants by a unit of the Polish Home Army in 1945 took place, forever and almost completely eradicating this rural bastion of Ukrainian identity in the Zakurzonia region. I first heard about this crime from my mother when I was still a child. I will always remember how sad I was when I visited Pawłokoma in 1984 and saw almost no trace of the once proud Ukrainian community there. I'm very grateful to Peter Potichnyj and Peter Yakob, whose maternal grandfather emigrated from Pawłokoma to Pittsburgh in 1903. Peter already mentioned that, for researching and writing this new history and demographic study, co-published in English online by the Institute of Ukrainian Studies and the Lviv journal Ukraina Moderna. Their work forever documents the fact that Pawłokoma was a Ukrainian settlement since ancient times, and it is only because of the atrocities committed by Polish war criminals in 1945 that it is no longer so. Over the course of several years, Professor Potichnyj devoted much effort into researching and collecting unique historical documents about Pawłokoma in the archives of Lviv and Przemysl, as well as the memories and testimonies of former residents of the village scattered around the world. His and Peter Yakob's authoritative work recreates the history of this settlement over more than 5 centuries. In it, we learn about the early history of the village in the Middle Ages, how its inhabitants lived, worked, rested, and celebrated during serfdom, who the local landowners were, and about individual families and their individual members. The book also depicts the history of Pawłokoma's Ukrainian community life. That is, the history of its church, school, and branch of the Prosvita cultural organization. In their book, the authors alternate between a detailed examination of their sources and methodology with descriptions of the village's history and, in some cases, broader contexts. They begin their narrative in prehistoric times. The authors trace the origins of the village itself to an ancient settlement on the outskirts of Pawłokoma, disagreeing with the thesis that the village arose in the 15th century when it was first mentioned on an empty site, quote, an empty site. They tell the story of the Pawłokoma school and the Prosvita society, describe peasant traditions of marriage and burial, depict a typical hut and household, and tell how immigrants who returned to the region brought with them a new Western type of construction. Most of these stories are taken mainly from Peter Potichnyj's previous book in a slightly abridged form. Peter Potichnyj compiled a detailed list and information about all of the villagers who were murdered in 1945, thus ensuring that their memory would be preserved. He also provides information about their killers, among whom were neighbors and even relatives of the victims. This important information proves that the myth of Polish innocence during the war remains unjustified, and that there were and perhaps still are war criminals who were never punished for their criminal acts. However, this new work focuses not on the tragedy of the village, but rather on its history before 1945. Peter Potichnyj was born there in 1930, and at the age of 15 he joined the Ukrainian insurgent army, with which he managed to break through to the West. He has spent his entire life on the American continent, first as a U.S. Marine in Japan and Korea, meaning he was transplanted by the Marine Corps to those countries, not that he lived there, and a student at Temple and Columbia universities. For many years, he then later served as a professor at McMaster University in Hamilton. Professor Potichnyj has devoted his studies primarily to two topics that directly affected his life: the Ukrainian liberation movement and his native village, which he left forever as a teenager. In their book, Potichnyj and Yakob have deliberately limited the focus of their research, concentrating on collecting and systematizing data on the village's population in order to provide a basis for further research, in particular for in-depth studies of the causes and consequences of demographic processes. Their main task was to identify every resident found in various archival data. Not an easy task, because the names of the same person were recorded in various archival records in different languages: Latin, German, Polish, Ukrainian, and in various transliterations. Consequently, the authors developed their own system for assigning each person a Pavlokoma personal identification number based on the American Soundex code, which Peter Yakob has already described, and you can find much more information in the book itself, although it's kind of a bit confusing, but it's there. The main sources for their study were the metrical books of births, marriages, and deaths of the Greek Catholic parish in Pawłokoma. The records preserved therein contain information beginning in 1784, when the Habsburg administration instructed Catholic parish priests of all rights to keep population records, that is, parishes throughout the empire. The village's metrical books are missing for significant periods of time after 1843 because most of them were destroyed in a fire in the parish church before their copies had been sent to the diocesan archive in Przemysl. The authors endeavored to fill these lacunae with civil records such as the population censuses in Austria-Hungary. Another important source was various migration documents from which Potichnyj and Yakob gleaned information about the villagers from Pavlokoma who immigrated to the New World, particularly to the U.S., ships, passenger lists, mobilization registers, naturalization data, and so on. They also obtained information through correspondence with people from Pavlokoma or their descendants. They also conducted several interesting analyses. For example, they determined the average age of first marriage for men and women, the number of remarriages, and the age difference between men and women in their first and second marriages. They also created a population pyramid for Pawłokoma in the years for 1787, 1800, 1842, 1912, and 1938, and have tried to determine which trends, such as epidemics and immigration, influence the structure of the population. In general, by comparing data from various sources, the authors managed to establish the names of 3,500 people born in Pawłokoma from the late 18th to the mid-20th century. The topographical part of the study deserves special attention. Using cadastral records and maps, Potichnyj and Yakob identified 163 different localities in the village as of the 1930s and 1940s, with a list of their inhabitants, and also localized each farm in the village as of 1945 with coordinates. These results are illustrated on the map that adorns the back cover, which is that one, isn't it? The authors recorded all of the results in numerous tables, which they included as 24 appendices totaling 443 pages. These appendices make up 3/4 of the book itself and are in fact the main result of their work. They also contain lists of the names of those villagers who were mobilized into the Polish and Red Armies during World War II, those who joined the UPA and Galicia Division, those who suffered Soviet and Nazi repression, and finally 366 of the victims of the 1945 massacre. Peter Potichnyj and Peter Yakob's book will remain an invaluable resource for anyone interested in the past of Pawłokoma and a solid basis for further research on the history of the village and its inhabitants. It is undoubtedly an important contribution to Ukrainian studies and a perfect example of microhistory research. In addition to its scholarly value, it also serves another function, the preservation of historical memory. I congratulate the co-authors on the publication of their study, and I wish them continued inspiration and the best of health.
Thank you. So as you have heard, the archival and documentary collections of Professor Potichnyj are extremely important and are well preserved at the University of Toronto Library. And I would like to ask Ksenia Kabuzynska from the Petro Yakob Bibliographic East European Research Center, I hope I've got all the names right. If they're not, she will fill them in correctly, to tell us about those collections. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Yes, my name's Ksenia Kabuzynski, and I'm head of the Petro Yakob Central and East European Resource Center for the University of Toronto Libraries. And I'm responsible for supporting research for our community at the university, as well as the external community and from abroad. And I'm also developed the collections at the University of Toronto. The kind of research that Peter Potichnyj and Peter Yakob do is one of my favorite kinds of research areas to support. I have never disparaged family research. I worked at the Archdiocese of Boston when I started my career, and these are some of the best researchers you will find, period. And I work with a lot of historians and literary scholars, but boy, they know their stuff. And it's incredibly important that these micro-level histories, especially for the part of Ukraine that has been deprived of its history. I do this research myself. And I can't help to think, when I think about Professor Peter Potichnyj, about some of the kind of intersections that my family probably had with his family. They're from Pikulice, but my grandfather and his younger brother were lawyers who very much defended national rights of Ukrainians, the use of language, the ability to celebrate folk traditions, freedom of religion. My grandfather was on an important case on the mass kind of beating up of a procession of Ukrainians who were going to church in Bircha. This was in 1939 for the holiday in June. And then war broke out, so the case never came to trial. His younger brother, also a lawyer, was arrested and sent to Bereza Kartuska, probably with your grandfather. And then their older brother was a priest, was massacred in Dobromil. I thought he was in the Selina mines, but I found out they massacred him right there in the prison. So there are these intersections, I think, for everyone in this room that are incredibly poignant. But I want to go back now to how I first knew about Professor Peter Potichnyj was his books, and they're on display here. I was a novice librarian working at the Ukrainian Research Institute at Harvard, and what a time to be starting to be a librarian in 1991. I started in January, and by later that year, all of a sudden there are people interested in Ukraine, and there was almost nothing in English for these people to read, except for some of these books. And I could rattle off 20 titles of books, and that was about all that we had. Things have certainly changed. I then heard from Peter Potichnyj when we acquired the Mykola Lebedь papers at Harvard, and I got a call from Toronto and trying to figure out to what extent the archive was intact. And then I met him at one of the annual conferences of what was then called AAASS, the American Association for the Advancement of Slavic Studies, where I believe Peter Potichnyj was roped into being a discussant. I checked the program, he's not there, but I pretty much am sure that Miroslava Znajenko and Anna Procek had him serve as a discussant on a panel I was on. I was very much interested in Ukrainian-Polish relations at the time. And then I came here to Toronto in 2006 and had more opportunities to meet with Professor Potichnyj in my role of building the collections and helping support research. We did receive his library. I think a lot of it had to do with the dissertation research on Soviet trade unions. And I discovered their books from Columbia and Yale that I discreetly sent back to Columbia and Yale. This is from one librarian to another. I do the same thing. I have books in my office that belong to the library that are hard to let go. But in my primary role was in supporting the archive that's already been mentioned. Its official name, the Peter J. Potichnyj Collection in Insurgency and Counterinsurgency in Ukraine, was officially opened at the University of Toronto Libraries nearly 30 years ago in spring 1997 with a reception held at the Petro Yakob Central and East European Resource Center under the hosting of Chief Librarian Carol Moore at the time and the director of the Center for Russian and East European Studies, as it was known then, Professor Robert Johnson. And at the time of the deposit, the collection numbered over 250,000 documents from Soviet, Polish, German, American, and Ukrainian underground archives. And Professor Peter Potichnyj, when addressing those present at the opening in 1997, remarked that the story should not end with what was donated at the time, and that the collection, quote, should be added to, expanded, and improved, end quote. Well, with the nearly yearly deposits, the collection has been added to and grown and now numbers 265 cartons of material, and I may be mistaken. There could have been a donation made without my knowing. Over 500 reels of microfilm and a finding aid. So that's the document that helps you discover what is in those 260 plus cartons, that numbers over 900 pages of folder level descriptions. So this can be found online. It's not housed with me. It's housed at the Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library and is officially, because of its size and scale, at Downsview. So the paper documents include private papers, correspondence, reports, unpublished memoirs and notes, interview transcripts, conference proceedings, Some publications, rare journals, off-prints, clippings, photographs, audiovisual material. The material that is archived records the editorial work of the Litopis UPA series, the activities of organizations, many of them, such as the Society of Veterans of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army in Canada. And they are also the professional and personal archive of Professor Potichnyj, so it's all mixed in together. And his endeavors are very interesting to study. And as has been already mentioned by Roman Senkus, they include the organization of a series of important conferences at McMaster University, among them Dissent in the Soviet Union in 1971, Ukraine in the 70s in 1974, Poland and Ukraine, past and present, 1977, Ukraine and Russia in their historical encounter, 1981, and on Ukrainian Jewish relations in historical perspective, 1983. That's just some. There are many more. And they're interesting not only because the conferences took place, you think, okay, you have proceedings, but it's the people, the planning process, who was invited, who didn't come, the correspondence, the follow-up correspondence, and an academic in the past 2 years, Alexander Avramchuk, actually looked at the material related to the Poland-Ukraine conference, and it formed a whole chapter in this book, and this actually belongs to you. He passed it on to me. And then within the physical collection, one can find very rare items, original documents from underground archive of the Nadrayon Beskid from Lemkivshtina in 1945, 1946, which was surfaced in 2002. So when I say surfaced, it means it was literally dug up, and it's here in Toronto. There are copies of the Ozerna archive found in 2004. Ozerna is a village in Zboriev Rayon, Ternopil Oblast. And that archive was found in a metal container. But we have the copies. The originals are with the State Archive of Ternopil Oblast, which is probably even better because they probably are more likely to digitize and make this available. Another example is an archive that belonged to the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalist Leadership of Sambir, which was buried in a large metal milk can sometime in 1948 and was discovered in 2014. That's also here. And I mean, I can go on and on. The physical material, so the documents, is supplemented with microfilm documents from the Polish Ministry of Public Security, the National Archives of the U.S., with particular material on the counterinsurgency activities of the German occupational forces, the Archive of Internal Forces of the Soviet Union, that's 428 reels, covering the activities of the NKVD, NKGB, and the MVD, MGB, internal forces of the Ukrainian Okrug against the Ukrainian Liberation Movement. This archive was moved to Moscow when Ukraine declared independence in 1991. Fortunately, a microfilm copy was deposited in Kiev, and we are the third home to that. So right now, this may be the safest place to do the research. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to help researchers from across Canada and the US and Europe who have consulted the Potichnyj collection on topics related to Polish-Ukrainian intellectual dialogue during the Cold War, Ukrainian-Jewish relations, and I'll just mention a few books that have been outcomes of research that were undertaken. Alexander Statyev, 2010, The Soviet Counterinsurgency in the Western Borderlands, Cambridge University Press. 2013, Diana Hovansky-Riley, The Forced Relocation of Poland's Ukrainians After World War II, University of Wisconsin Press. Serhii Kudelia in 2013, an article on choosing violence in irregular wars, the case of anti-Soviet insurgency in Western Ukraine, that appeared in the journal East European Politics and Societies and Cultures. In 2019, Yuri Radchenko, the OUNM, meaning the Mennik faction, collaboration and Holocaust as reflected in the biographies of nationalists, published in the Yad Vashem Studies Journal. Jean-Paul Hemka, 2021, Ukrainian Nationalists in the Holocaust, OUN and UPA's participation in the destruction of Ukrainian Jewry, 1941-1944, and then Oleksandr Avramchuk's 2024 study on the Republic of Scholars, the Rise of Ukrainian Studies and Polish-Ukrainian Dialogue of Historians in the U.S., 1939-1991. And lastly, I'd like to mention a forthcoming book in English, Olena Petrenko's Women in the Ukrainian Underground, that will be published by McGill Queen's University Press in December of this year. This is a translation of her work. So, and besides the scholars, I have to say that we get emails of people who find a village in the finding aid from where they were from. They want to know more. We get people who see the name of a relative and they just want something tangible. It may not say anything particular about the individual, but they just want some document that kind of confirms their interests, their history, their memory. So I look forward to the collection continuing to expand, and I think there's also a call for we need to do more on preserving and making available some of the more fragile documents. And I would also ask Professor Peter Potichnyj to devote more time on documenting the history of the collecting. I looked at My Journey. I read it this morning over again, and there's only one page devoted to the collection. And there are many historians who are interested in the acts of what collecting means and how those documents came. So that there's more work to be done. And I'll end on that note.
Yeah, and lest you think why these matters are important, I had someone from Ukraine getting in touch with me 2 days ago to say, at that conference at McMaster's, the Polish-Ukrainian conference, do you know if Bogdan Ossadchuk really was there, because it doesn't show up in some literature? I would have had two choices at that moment. One would have been to be a good scholar and go over to the library and trace this down. Instead, I wrote an email to Professor Potichnyj and said, was he there? And I immediately got back, yes, he was. So it solved my problem. But we are glad he has such a phenomenal and good memory. And we are also pleased that he cooperated with the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies in so many of his publications. And I'd like to ask the director of our press, Dr. Mark Kostek, to say a few words about his relation with our press.
Добрий день. First of all, I apologize to Pete and John that I will speak in Ukrainian.
I'll translate it.
Я дуже цілеспрямовано і зі свідомим наміром не підготовив собі формальної доповіді, саме тому, що одна з трьох причин є це, що вона має бути неформальна. Тому що, якщо я би мав представити формальну доповідь про досягнення професора Потічного в ділянці академічних студій, я думаю, що я би мусив тут бодай годину говорити. Я не думаю, що ви хочете слухати мене годину. А друга причина – це тому, що я хочу представити свій погляд на значення доробку наукового професора Потічного з дуже суб'єктивної точки зору. і трішки, можливо, інакше, ніж ця тема, яку ми сьогодні тут обговорюємо, тема Павлокоми, навіть тема націоналістичного руху. А я хотів би трішки сказати кілька думок про це, як я особисто бачу місце професора Петра Потічного в контексті академічних студій українознавчих в університетській системі Північної Америки. І тому через це, що я хочу, мені здається, що зрозуміти вклад професора Потічного можна лише тоді, коли зрозуміти контекст часу, в якому він працював, і в якому він функціонував, і як він змінив зі свого боку цей контекст, в якому ми всі зараз, які працюють в університетській системі, існуємо. Ми всі вже, напевно, дуже звикли, що від початку повномасштабного вторгнення Росії в Україну Україна стала темою часом і центральною для геополітичних роздумів. Не лише Україна може бути на перших сторінках газет і тема України, але Україна є дуже-дуже серйозно досліджувана в академічних студіях. Я говоритиму про Північну Америку, але не тільки. Ясно, що так не завжди було. Трішки це почалося раніше із Революції Гідності, після якої був сплеск зацікавлення. А ще Ксенія сказала про це, як в 91-му році раптом. І з проголошенням незалежності раптом світ, а зокрема академічний світ, відкрив для себе Україну. Від цього часу, хоча з нашої точки зору, як українських дослідників, чи як взагалі української громади, дуже багато текстів можна би вважати проблематичними, але не було питання щодо цього, що Україна є, так як би це сказати англійською мовою, a legitimate subject of study. В цей час, коли професор Потічний починав працювати, ситуація була зовсім інакша. Я взагалі піду трішки назад, щоб сказати про контекст. Якщо ми підемо назад до 30-х років, навіть 40-х, початку 50-х, ми побачимо, що України в академічному світі не існує. Північної Америки. Нема чогось такого, як Україна. Дуже-дуже рідкісно трапляються винятки, так як Кларенс Маннінг, який працював в Колумбійському університеті, який писав про культуру. Якщо ще про літературу, це було можливо. Воно з'являлося, ця назва, але в контексті політичних наук або в контексті історії Україна була лише такою часом, маленькою, так би сказати, footnote, зноскою до історії Росії. І я вам скажу трішки про інших людей, про яких ми, напевно, знаємо, але це також провадить контекст. Коли професор Луцький прийшов сюди на початку 50-х років, він практично мусив із нуля встановити тут студії поняття української літератури, української культури загалом. Як ви, ці, можливо, які знають про його працю, знають, що він створив і серію підручників, і перекладів інших підручників, і насправді він тут встановив це щось із нуля. І дам вам приклад на це, як це було важко. Коли він написав свою дуже важливу книжку про Гоголя і Шевченка, це буде кінець 60-х років, він в цей час був деканом славістичного відділу тут в університеті Торонто. Він здав цю книжку, цей манускрипт, дуже зрівноваженої академічної студії до University of Toronto Press. University of Toronto Press віддало це до єдиного рецензента, який був російським спеціалістом від російської літератури, який сказав, що це є націоналістична робота, як можна назвати Гоголя учасником не лише російської літератури, але також і української. І автоматично було відкинена ця книжка декана славістичного інституту цього університету. Книжка мусила бути надрукована у Німеччині через старання іншого людини, яка пробувала з нуля творити українські студії, тим разом в Харварді, це був Мелан Прицак. І ви, напевно, знаєте трішки більше про Прицака, і про Івана Лисака Рудницького, який творив також, пробував встановляти поняття України в історичній науці. Досить забута частина цієї академічної громади цього часу, і, зокрема, української, це є політичні науки. Це саме ця ділянка, де був, в якій працював професор Потічний. Ми зараз про багатьох із тих науковців не пам'ятаємо. Скажімо, чи багато з вас пам'ятає про Ярослава Білінського, який працював в Америці. Це тому, що вони працювали в дуже, я би сказав, такій невдячній з наукової точки зору ділянці. Політичні науки є надзвичайно важливі в даний час. І вони відігравали дуже сильну роль під час Холодної війни. Вони часом мали і вплив на політичні події, тому що до них прислухалися, якщо не політики, то радники політиків, так як Збігнєв Бжезінський. Вони писали дуже важливі речі, але ці речі після 5-10 років, коли міняється ситуація, вони стають першими забутими. Професор Потічний писав про профспілки в Україні свою дисертацію. Це одна із тих тем, яка з часом відходить в забуття, тому що коли міняються часи. Але професор Потічний був унікальним серед цієї групи. І я скажу з мого боку, чому саме. Я вважаю, що він мав і має далі надзвичайно велику здібність, надзвичайно великий талант відкривати простори дискусії, шукати контактів, включати людей в ширший контекст наукової праці. І я скажу лише про 3 книжки, які він видав. І всі 3 книжки на основі конференції, які він сам організував. І тут я відійду від цього питання Павлокоми, Закерзоння, чи навіть націоналістичного руху, хоча його книжка про політичну думку націоналістичного руху, це була перша книжка справді про УПА і націоналістичний рух в контексті наукового дискурсу в англійській мові. Але я скажу про 3 книжки. Це перша вже кілька разів згадана Poland and Ukraine Past and Present. Друга, я, на жаль, не взяв там, це є, але я зараз принесу. Друга – це Ukraine and Russia in their historical encounter. І третя – Ukrainian Jewish relations in historical perspective. Це вже є 3-тє видання цієї книжки, вона досі є дуже актуальною. Як ви бачите з цих тем, професор Потічний першим, наскільки я знаю з усіх українських академіків в системі університетів в Північній Америці, взявся за 3 головні теми. За 3 найбільш контроверсійні і найбільш складні теми. Причому він не пішов, так би мовити, українським шляхом. Він не пішов тим, щоб зібрати навколо себе однодумців, зібратися в малій кімнаті, погодитися на всі ідеї, що ми всі погоджуємося на те, що це все є так, і тоді розійтися, надрукувати щось і розійтися додому. Якщо ви подивитеся на ці книжки, побачите перш за все, що це не лише українські науковці, а навпаки. в книжці про Польщу ще українці ще становлять більшість, але все ж таки далеко не велику. Але якщо ви подивитеся на книжку про українсько-єврейські стосунки, це не лише, що там є більш-менш пів на пів, але все ж таки євреїв, здається, трошки більше. Але це є голоси, які абсолютно часом не погоджуються між собою. Це є спроба зібрати зі собою, зібрати в одному місці, і між іншим подібно також і про Ukraine and Russia. Там є російські спеціалісти, які не погоджуються з українськими спеціалістами, але це є арена для серйозної дискусії. Це є єдине, що може в академічному світі принести будь-який можливий результат. Якщо професор Potichnyj зібрав би своїх однодумців, вони склали би таку книжку, ніхто інший цього не сприймав. Це навіть цього не було би варто в академічному контексті видавати. Професор Potichnyj пішов на щось, що вимагало особистої відваги, бо це далеко не всі ці ідеї були сприйняті, скажімо, для української громади. Це треба було поставити питання відкритості до дискусії на першому місці. І в цьому випадку мені здається, що ніхто інший з тих науковців, якого я знаю, не мав оцієї людської здібності притягати до себе людей, які би пізніше брали участь в серйозній дискусії, незалежно від цього, які вони мають погляди. І лише в такому контексті можна було створити якраз арену для цього, щоб діалог в науці відбувався далі. І я не знаю, так я кажу, я не знаю іншого академіка, який зміг це зробити так успішно. І, скажімо, якщо тільки сказати про це, як воно породило далі майбутні результати, я покажу іншу книжку на тему, бо ця книжка про Україну і Росію вже давно недоступна, вона вже випродана, але була наступна книжка, яка взяла на основі цієї взяла наступний крок і наступне покоління істориків. Тут сидить один із її редакторів, і я думаю, що Френк погодиться зі мною, що це було, що перша книжка Петра Potichnyja була натхненням для цієї. Це є книжка вже на початку 2000-х років, створена Френком Сисеном, Марком фон Хагеном, Сеном Когутом і Андресом Капелером з подібної, дуже складної конференції на теми російсько-українських стосунків. І щоб ще показати, наскільки out of the box професор Potichnyj часом і часто звертався. Це також книжка, яка створена за його впливом. Це українсько-китайський словник. Справа в цьому, що з 85-го року професор Potichnyj був радником в Харбінському університеті в Китаю. І серед іншого, наскільки я розумію, там і китайською мовою тоді вийшов переклад історії України під вашим впливом там. У всякому разі, але цей єдиний, наскільки я знаю, поки що словник китайсько-український, це створений завдяки впливові професора Potichnyja. Я кажу, якщо я би мав формально розповідати про все, що професор Potichnyj досягнув, я би мусив тут бути набагато довше, так що я на цьому завершу. Дякую.
Очевидно, перед нами ще є і буде вино, і належне святкування. Дійдемо до кінця нашої програми. Я би просив Божену Гематюк казати кілька слів.
Це тільки коротенька подяка. Шановний і дорогий професоре Потічний, дозвольте мені висловити вам щиру подяку від Українсько-Канадського дослідчо-документаційного центру, як також від себе особисто, за багаторічну підтримку нашого центру. Як науковий дорадник у КДДЦ, ви все піднімали телефон, як я дзвонила, все були готові порадити і допомогти, коли ми зверталися до вас з різними питаннями. Дякуємо вам за інтерв'ю, які ви перевели в 89-му році в Амстердамі з голландськими офіцерами, які оповідають про свою вдячність українським повстанцям за гуманність та доброзичливість у врятуванні їхнього життя, коли у 1944 році вони втікали від німців. Це справді надзвичайно цікаві та унікальні записи в нашому архіві усної історії, і ми стараємося далі опрацьовувати цей проєкт по можливості, шукаючи додаткових інформацій в голландських архівах. Дорогий професоре Потічний, ми цінуємо всі ваші розумні поради впродовж років, ваш великий внесок у збереження української історичної пам'яті та вашу підтримку і віру в працю Українсько-Канадського дослідчо-документаційного центру. Вітаємо вас з новим досягненням і даруємо вам, як знак подяки, перо з нашим лого, щоб ви далі писали без упину. Дякую.
We will, I think, sing Mnohé Elita more than once and with wine later. But what I would propose right now is, before I let our honored professor say some words to us, we would perhaps sing our first Mnohé Elita. I nie skąpy jak Polaka, nie tylko 100 lat, ale Mnohé Elita. To proszę na czas i potem poprosimy pana profesora. Dobrze. To zaczynają, którzy mają głos. Mnohé Elita, Mnohé Elita, Mnohé Elita, Mnohé Elita, Mnohé Elita, Mnohé Elita, Proszę pan profesor.
Allow me, first of all, to thank you. Sunday afternoon is usually time when people relax. The fact that you actually decided to come here and sit for an hour or 2 hours, I don't know how long it is simply amazing. So I would like to thank a few people who contributed to the appearance of the book. It is indeed very nice to hear all of these beautiful words and discussion about my accomplishments, which I never actually thought about in those terms at all. But the most important thing is what has appeared and whether in fact it is useful. And it appears to me that perhaps the last book about Pawlokoma, the demographic study, is indeed a very useful one because it provides an example or sample of what can be done in the area of historical demography, and especially in the areas, villages or countries like Ukraine that has suffered tremendous population losses. The fact that we were able, together with Peter Yakob, and not only him, but also other people, to bring back over 3,000 people's names is, I think, a good thing. It is my hope, and actually that was the goal that we put before ourselves. It was our goal to provide a sample of a study which could be maybe useful in other areas. And since we have here people from Zakarzonia, and they are organized, let me say that perhaps you ought to seriously think about continuing this kind of studies about your areas of origin, your background, your villages, and so on. It is not as difficult as it sounds. Yes, in our area, in our study, it took almost 5 years from the beginning to what we have now. But I think if you organize yourself, and it doesn't have to be done for every village, but you can select certain areas, collect some of the money, collect some of the documents in the archives. Many of them are available in Ukraine or in Poland. And they're not too expensive to get. And then find someone who may be able to be interested in, may be able to do something with this. You're going to accomplish a very important task. You bring many people who otherwise would be totally forgotten, areas that have been destroyed, back to life. Put it back into into use. Well, anyway, I would like to, first of all, thank Peter Yakob, who spent a tremendous amount of time on the Pawłokoma study, especially demographic study, who together with his son, John, and Paul, who know the technical side of it all, could put it together. I would not have been able to do it on my own. I'm much more interested in historic study, but they brought in a technology, knowledge of new approach to study. And the result is what we have in front of us. So, Peter, thank you very much. I would also like to thank Professor Frank Sisson, who was the first person who decided that perhaps it is worthwhile to support such a study. It has been a long time ago, the time that you mentioned that I spoke also here, who said, when I complained that nobody's interested in supporting this kind of study, he said, well, I am interested. So therefore, thank you very much. I also like to thank Mr. Roman Sankush, Dr. Marko Stek, who were supportive of this study. So please accept my deep thanks. The book on Pawłokoma, the last one, is a third book. The first two, one was in Ukrainian, the other one was in translation. This one is a totally new one, and therefore I'm delighted that I actually see it out, because I didn't expect to see it published in my lifetime. I'm 95, almost 96, soon enough. So therefore, it's a miracle for me that it has appeared. I certainly didn't expect any such praises to hear tonight. I hope that the focus will be on a book rather than on me or the so-called my accomplishments. I don't think very much about my accomplishments and don't consider them as great as some of you have said. But thank you for it anyway. Я кажу, може, це не місце робити тому що це може виглядати як родинне збіговисько. Але я дуже радий, що моя родина особисто і взагалі родина Потічних не є інклюзивною. Ми маємо в своїй родині двох італійців. Ми маємо шотландця, який вже говорить українською мовою. І ми маємо, так би мовити, одного з індіанських warriors, який теж належить до нашої родини. І тому я радий тому, що, наприклад, мого брата, не моєго брата, вибачаємо, одна, що моя внучка, яка закінчила теж і Торонський університет і зробила магістерку, виходить заміж теж за одного з італійців, який, одначе, не співак, тільки буде учителем. Надіюся, що він теж навчиться української мови. Я думаю, що я буду кінчати, тому що, перш всього, час затягується, і я чую, що там є щось солодкого з кавою, і навіть щось сильнішого в формі вина. Я мушу вважати, я маю проблеми ходити без вина. Але попробую і я. І тому я буду кінчати. Ще раз дуже сердечно дякую вам за це, що ви прийшли. І я спеціально, я здивований, спеціально здивований тим, що закерзоння, організація закерзонців в моєму імені дала допомогу українській армії воювати за незалежність. Тому ще раз, може я багатьох оминув, вибачайте, але я хотів би ще раз всім вам подякувати за це, що ви прийшли, і що ви вважали важливим прийти і мене в якийсь спосіб похвалити. Дякую.
So your first obligation before you join us for wine and food is remember that when you go home, you're to hit the link and look at the book, right? That's the most important thing of this. And with
Дякую за тут Христом.
here because. Yeah. Was he talking about black man? This guy, I know.
A demo is the same. Demo is the same.
They know how to do this stuff. They could write code.
So we should plan for a Wednesday. Let me just
5 years now that I do a lot of
I wouldn't miss it. I'm at the age where I'm going.